Picture this: March 24, 1976. Three neighbors forced a door open. Inside apartment 32, a sight that would haunt them forever awaited. Fully furnished beds, made dishes drying, yet utterly devoid of life. No clothes, no shoes, no photos, no toys, just emptiness. The Mironov family gone. 14 years erased without a trace. A ripple of unease spread, quickly suppressed by officialdom. But in those first hours, the neighbors felt something incomprehensible. Imagine Tamara Belova calling out, her voice desperate. Silence answered, a silence of recent abandonment. The Mironovs, a typical family in every way that mattered. Oleg, 42, a machinist known for his precision. His hands scarred by his trade, told a story of hard work. Quiet and reliable, he never drew attention to himself. Irina, 39, taught literature with quiet passion. She believed literature could reveal truths ideology obscured. Dignified, she had made peace with the life she had. Her dark hair pulled back, dressed modestly, a Soviet teacher. Maxim and Anna, ordinary children, shaped by their time. Imagine a typical English family living a normal life. Then one morning, they vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the echoes of their existence, a mystery that continues to baffle and intrigue. What happened to the Mironov family? The apartment remembers, but it cannot speak. Imagine a teacher, her true beliefs sometimes obscured. She never openly challenged Soviet views, but her students sensed it. She emphasized individual conscience over collective duty. She wore her hair in a bun, dressed modestly, with quiet dignity. She seemed to have made peace with the life she had. Her children, a boy of 13 and a girl of 9, were ordinary. The boy 13 loved taking apart old radios. The girl 9 asked uncomfortable questions about the world. Her parents redirected her with patient explanations. The family navigated the gap between ideology and reality. They whispered their doubts late at night when the children slept. They moved into building number 7 in 1962. It was a 2-room apartment assigned through the factory. The apartment measured 48 square meters. It had a small kitchen and a bathroom with intermittent hot water. The living room doubled as the parents' bedroom. The children slept in a smaller room. The building was a standard 5-story structure. These buildings were quickly built to address housing shortages. They showed signs of deterioration within a decade. The neighborhood was typical of provincial cities in the 70s. There was a mix of apartment blocks and older wooden houses. Shops were perpetually undersupplied and parks filled with chess players. The city had been transformed by industrialization. Its factories produced equipment with defense applications. This meant a higher presence of security personnel. Picture this: 7 a.m. The morning shift begins at the machine building plant. He leaves his flat at 6:30, a 15-minute walk to the number 12 bus. The number 12 bus carries him to the factory district. The plant makes equipment for agricultural machinery. Some equipment could be adapted for military use, everyone knew. Security officers appeared asking about worker loyalty. He worked a lathe producing components with millimeter tolerances. It was work that demanded concentration, little time for talk. Her day began earlier, at 6 a.m. preparing breakfast. She made a simple breakfast before waking the children. She walked her daughter to school 3 blocks away. Then she took the trolley bus to school number 14. She taught Russian literature to students aged 14 to 17. Her classroom was on the 3rd floor of an old building. The room had high ceilings and inadequate heating. Students smoked in the courtyard, pretending not to notice teachers. She taught from approved textbooks, emphasizing progressive traditions. She delivered interpretations with competence, maintaining her own understanding. The family's social life involved collective activities. They attended events, voted, and maintained enthusiastic citizenship. Their private life took place in the apartment. He taught his son to repair items she read to her daughter. They discussed ordinary things at the kitchen table. Conversations were careful, avoiding dangerous topics. They learned self-censorship, separating public speech and private belief. A neighbor became friendly, sharing small acts of assistance. Imagine a society where every thought is policed, every word measured. Soviet citizens learned self-censorship, a constant internal monitoring. Tamara, living in apartment 31, befriended Irina. Small acts of kindness defined their friendship in Soviet life. They shared scarce goods and watched each other's children. Tamara's husband had access to goods through unofficial channels. She shared these advantages with Irina, a true friend indeed. Tea and conversation filled their days, complaints, and guarded hopes. They discussed their children's futures and the promises of communism. On March 22, 1976, Tamara knocked on the door. She returned a book of poetry, a treasure, shared reluctantly. No one answered. She tried again later, thinking they were out. Perhaps an evening walk, or a visit to Oleg's mother across town. Still no answer. Unusual but not alarming families have their reasons. The next morning, March 23rd, the door remained closed. No sounds of morning routine, no water, no children preparing. She thought they might be sick, a flu circulating through the city. She knocked again at noon, offering medicine or bread. No answer. She pressed her ear against the door, hearing nothing. By evening, Tamara's concern deepened into something approaching fear. She mentioned the absence to her husband, who offered explanations. Perhaps Oleg's mother was ill, a family emergency. But these explanations did not satisfy Tamara. Something was wrong. No note, no message. The absence of communication troubled her most. On March 24th, she knocked louder, calling Irina's name. Still no response. She went downstairs to apartment 10. Their plans remained a mystery, the silence fueling her unease. No response. She sought Grigory, the building's representative. Grigory, chosen to address housing issues, answered in slippers. Tamara explained the Mironov's absence of 2 days. He hesitated, citing rules against entering without tenants. Tamara insisted, her voice trembling with a nervous edge. Grigory relented, grabbing his keys, and asked for a witness. Pavlanovich from apartment 28 joined them. They knocked loudly, announcing themselves, but no response. Grigory unlocked the door, but something blocked it. Pavel forced the door open, revealing a disturbing scene. The apartment was stripped bare of personal belongings. The coat rack stood empty, no shoes lined the hall. Wardrobes hung open, revealing empty space. Bathroom shelves lacked toiletries, soap, toothbrushes. Kitchen cabinets held only basic dishes, nothing more. Tamara walked through disbelief, etched on her face. Drawers were empty, no towels in the bathroom. The kids' room lacked toys, books, drawings, family photographs, memories of a life all gone. Irina's handwritten recipes vanished without a trace. Even small things like her sewing kit were missing. The neighbors struggled to understand the scene. Pavle suggested an evacuation, but it didn't quite fit. Imagine a home stripped bare, the Black Sea a memory, Irina's recipes gone. Her handwritten cards, detailing dishes learned from generations, vanished. Even small comforts like Irina's sewing kit had disappeared without a trace. 3 neighbors stood bewildered, struggling to grasp the unsettling scene. One suggested evacuation, a sudden emergency. But the logic crumbled. Why strip a home, bare removing every personal item, yet leave the furniture? Another proposed immigration, a sudden departure granted by the union. But immigration meant months of paperwork, public goodbyes, not this secrecy. Then a chilling certainty washed over her, a truth she couldn't ignore. Something had happened to the family, demanding their complete erasure. Not just absence, but the obliteration of their very existence. She recalled whispered conversations, careful phrasing, unspoken thoughts. Within 2 hours, local authorities arrived, taking brief statements. The officers sealed the door with tape, offering no explanation. That evening, shadowy figures arrived, their message clear, no further questions. The following morning, a truck arrived, beginning the systematic removal. Workers emptied the apartment, carrying furniture with practiced efficiency. Others arrived with paint and plaster, erasing any trace of the past. By evening, apartment 32 was an empty box, ready for a new family. A family who would never know the previous occupants had existed. Official explanations began to circulate, tailored for each audience. At the factory, a supervisor announced a classified project in the Urals. A sensitive assignment requiring immediate relocation, prohibiting contact. At school number 14, a prestigious position at a specialized school. Imagine a machine-building plant where a supervisor calls a meeting. Comrade Mironov, they announce, has been selected for a classified project. The assignment requires immediate relocation and prohibits communication. The announcement was delivered in a tone that discouraged questions. Oleg's workstation was cleared and reassigned within a week. At school number 14, the principal called a meeting. Comrade Mironova accepted a prestigious teaching position. The opportunity required immediate action, the principal explained. Individual career advancement must take precedence, he emphasized. Irina's replacement began teaching the following Monday. Maxim and Anna moved to be closer to extended family members. The missing children were soon forgotten in the rhythms of school life. The official explanations rang hollow to those who knew the family well. Tamara couldn't reconcile the story with the emptiness of the apartment. She attempted to inquire further, first with Grigory, who was cold. The matter has been resolved through proper channels, he said coldly. She called the personnel department, but information was classified. She asked for Irina's forwarding address, but privacy prohibited it. 2 weeks after the disappearance, a KGB officer visited Tamara. He identified himself as a representative of state security. He asked about her friendship with Irina Mironova. The questions were posed gently, but Tamara understood what was happening. She was being tested, her loyalty assessed. She told the officer what he needed to hear. Irina had been a loyal teacher, she said, enthusiastic about socialist education. Unnecessary curiosity could be misinterpreted as interference, he warned. Imagine a neighbor asked about a family only expressing enthusiasm for socialist education. Conversations, limited, nothing unusual, noticed before their departure a seemingly ordinary family. An officer's comment? A warning perhaps about respecting privacy and state security. She understood completely, or so she said, but trembled, realizing her role in erasing her friend. She helped confirm the family could be forgotten, unaware of the events leading to their disappearance. Decades later, documents revealed a trivial beginning to a Soviet tragedy. A moment of honest observation, unremarkable in a normal society, became a catastrophe's seed. 6 months earlier, September 1975, a mandatory party meeting at the factory. Workers discussed strategies for meeting production quotas, a predictable script. The foreman presented statistics, identified gaps, and called for suggestions. Suggestions were usually bland, but this night, Oleg spoke honestly. He suggested addressing equipment failures and material shortages, not just demanding higher output. Machines were breaking down, spare parts were allocated elsewhere, materials were inconsistent. Workers were willing but lacked the tools, his comments framed as constructive criticism. But in the context of Soviet political culture, it was a dangerous deviation. The mistake was compounded by timing and circumstance. His supervisor under investigation. The supervisor was suspected of unauthorized contact with a West German delegation. No evidence of espionage, but the investigation placed the supervisor under scrutiny. Oleg's comment was interpreted as evidence of the supervisor's ideological laxity, his failure to maintain proper political discipline among his subordinates. A notation was placed in Oleg's personnel file, a brief entry in bureaucratic language, noting that he had engaged in criticism of Soviet industrial planning during. Picture this, a seemingly insignificant comment with far-reaching consequences. A single act of honesty, a seed planted in the fertile ground of paranoia. Imagine a factory where a worker's past casts a long shadow. An investigation, though fruitless, left a supervisor vulnerable. A casual remark twisted into evidence of ideological failing. A notation, a bureaucratic seed of suspicion, was planted. Marked for review, his reliability now under constant watch. The notation, a dormant threat waiting for its moment. February 1976. A directive from Moscow arrives. Identify and process those with markers of unreliability. The 25th Party Congress looms a stage for vigilance. The KGB seeks to ensure no dissent mars the proceedings. Quotas assigned vigilance demonstrated potential troublemakers. The workers' file flagged months prior now under scrutiny. Major, a career officer, sees a potential threat. Thoroughly indoctrinated preemptive action is necessary. Not a suggestion, but a vector for ideological contamination. Access to technical specifications, a potential security risk. A teacher wife influencing young minds, a concern. Children approaching adolescence, parental influence strong. An unacceptable risk, administrative resolution is required. Removal outside the legal system, a bureaucratic euphemism. March 19, 1976, the recommendation approved. The operational plan prepared, implementation scheduled. Night of March 22nd, chosen to minimize witnesses. 8 operatives securing the family, removing all items. Maximum efficiency, minimum visibility, the goal. 3 a.m. March 23rd, the operation begins. Building number 7, the team enters the night silent. Picture this, 1976 Colonel Olaf approves a removal outside the legal system. The plan was set in motion, prepared over 2 days, timed for minimal witnesses. 8 operatives would enter the apartment to secure the family. They would transport them to separate facilities, removing all personal items. The operation was to be conducted with maximum efficiency and minimum visibility. They moved to the 3rd floor, positioning themselves outside apartment 32. Major Kuzmin gave the signal, and they entered with practiced coordination. How they obtained the keys remains unclear to this day. Oleg woke, sensing a presence. He was immediately restrained. Irina woke to see men standing over their bed, opened her mouth to scream. An operative placed a hand over her mouth, administering a sedative. In the children's room, the children were secured, confused, and terrified. The family was dressed quickly in outdoor clothing. They were led down the stairwell and placed into separate vehicles. Oleg was restrained in one vehicle, Irina drowsy in another. The children were told they were going on a special trip. The vehicles departed separately, taking different routes. Oleg was driven to a detention facility on Soviet Street. The facility was unknown to the building's regular occupants. Oleg was processed, photographed, and placed in cell number 5, a small concrete room with a steel cot and a single dim bulb. No charges were filed, no interrogation conducted. He was simply held. Irina and the children were transported to a former tuberculosis sanatorium. The facility had been repurposed as a transit point for administrative processing. Irina was placed in a locked room. The children were taken to the pediatric ward. Imagine preparations were underway for the family's relocation. Repurposed, it served as a transit point for administrative processing. The mother, still affected, was placed in a locked room. A nurse assured them their parents were being treated. For 2 weeks, each family member underwent systematic processing. They underwent medical examinations and psychological evaluations. The evaluations were conducted to justify administrative detention. The father was assessed as showing signs of ideological instability. The mother was seen as a potential transmission vector. The children were at high risk of developing antisocial attitudes. On April 7, 1976, the processing was complete. The family would be transferred to a remote detention facility, a place where people were erased from society. The facility had begun as a camp during an earlier era. The family arrived after a 4-day journey. They were separated upon arrival. The father was assigned to the woodworking shop. The mother and children were housed in a barracks. The mother was assigned to kitchen work. They were permitted to see each other for 1 hour each Sunday. Life at the facility followed rigid patterns unchanged for decades. The detainees existed in indefinite limbo. They had simply ceased to exist in the official world. Imagine a place where hope fades, sentences stretch without end. Years turned into decades with no appeal, no freedom. They simply ceased to exist, erased from the Soviet world. Their names vanished, employment records disappeared, homes reassigned. Friends were intimidated to forget memories suppressed. They existed only in a remote facility and KGB files. Back in town, their apartment was given to a young couple. Engineers unaware of the previous lives, violently interrupted. The Mironovs were forgotten, erased from memory. A document revealed their fate. Oleg died in 1983. Heart failure at 49, nearly 7 years after arrival. Irina's fate is unknown, possibly surviving until 1989. The children's fate remains a mystery, their survival uncertain. Their story represents a thread in the tapestry of Soviet repression. Bureaucratic procedures, institutional complicity, social silence. Oleg's crime, honesty. His punishment, death at 49.